Shalom from Beit and thank you for joining me in the study of Parashat Sav. In Parashat Sav, the Torah describes and basically delineates all the types of korbanot. Some of them were already mentioned in Parashat Vayikra, but in Parashat Sav, you can have the same korbanot, but the sequence and the list is a little different. And what we will do today, or at least we will try to do today, is to try to understand the sequence, the meaning of it, and the reason some of the sacrifices that were mentioned in Vayikra first become second or third. So let's see. The Torah begins with Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe le'emor, and Hashem spoke to Moshe, saying, Tzav et Aharon ve'et banav le'emor, command Aharon and his children, saying to them, Zot Torat Olah, this is the laws of the Olah, of the elevation offering. Hi ha'olah al mokdah al hamizbeach kol halayla ad haboker. This is the offering, the sacrifice that goes on the mizbeach, on the altar, kol halayla, the entire night until the morning. Ve'esh hamizbeach tukad bo, and the fire in the altar will consume that korban. Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch says the following: הפרשה הקודמת, last week's parasha, which was Parashat Vayikra, תיארה, delineates, describes that הסוגים השונים של הקורבנות, the different types of sacrifices. קורבנות נדבה, sacrifices that comes as a donation, Olah, the elevation offering, mincha, shlamim, peace offerings, קורבנות חובה, some sacrifices that comes as a result of a sin, המכפרים על חטא, like חטאת, אין אשם, guilt offering, sin offering. נתבהרו שם הלכות שונות של הקורבנות, and in Vayikra, last week's parasha, many of the laws of the korbanot were put forth for us to know. וידיעת הלכות אלה חשובה גם לבעלים המבקשים בהם את קרבת השם. And everyone needs to know the details of the halachot, of the laws, the Kohanim, the priests, as well as us. But now, ההלכות המבוארות בשני הפרקים הבאים משלימות את התיאור הזה. But now the laws that we will find in the next two chapters of Parashat Sav, which is the beginning of Parashat Sav until approximately the middle of Parashat Sav, משלימות את התיאור הזה. They basically complete this entire description, but however, הן נוגעות בעיקר לכהנים שנצטוו על הקרבת הקורבנות. However, there is a difference between Parashat Sav and Parashat Vayikra. In Parashat Vayikra, it was free for all, meaning these are the types of sacrifices: elevation offering, peace offering, guilt offering, sin offering, and all the details that we all need to know, the priests and us. However, Parashat Sav focus in only really on the Kohanim. ומשום כך, הן אמורות בייחוד לאהרון ובניו. And therefore, that explains the opening statement of our parasha. Tzav, command Aharon ובניו. Really, Aharon and his children, not all of Am Yisrael. Now we focus in on the servants in the Mishkan, in the tabernacle, which are Aharon and his children. בהתאם לכך, and also according to that, or in accordance with this idea, נשתנה גם סדר הקורבנות. The order of the sacrifices was changed. אין הם מסודרים על פי הסיבה שגרמה להם. They are not organized by the reason, חובה or נדבה, which means an obligatory sacrifice or a sacrifice that comes as something that I just volunteer to give it, אלא על פי דרגת קדושתה. But rather, the order of the sacrifices, same sacrifices, but the order is different. Why? Because now it's based on the level of sanctity, of holiness of each sacrifice. קודשי קודשים וקודשים קלים. First, the holy of the holiest, and then it goes down. לפיכך, נמנו תחילה, therefore, this is the reason why in Parashat Sav, the first sacrifice that we discuss is Olah, is the elevation offering. After that you have the mincha, and after that you have the chatat and the asham, which means first you have the kodshei kodashim, what is the most holy, and then it goes down, v'shlamim acharem, and obviously the last one is shlamim, which is a peace offering, which is basically, it's almost like a barbecue, a family barbecue, and it's also a korban. So Rabbi Shimshon Raphael here says to us, and in a way it frames for us this entire parsha, because when you read this parsha, you say to yourself, just one moment, I already read about it last week. Answer is yes, you read about the same sacrifices, but pay attention to the order of the sacrifices now, and pay attention to whom that commanded was to, which is Aaron and his children. So, we would expect now that really the focus of this parsha is on Aaron and his children, the Kohanim, and the tribe of Levi and the Kohanim, unlike what we read in Parashat Vayikra. The Olah Chaim looked at Parashat Sav and the order of the sacrifices and the entire content in a very different light than Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch. And he says, ובדרך רמז, and if I look at it more mystically, תרמוז כל הפרשה, this entire parsha of Tzav, will basically direct us to what? על גלות האחרון שאנו בו, לנחמנו מעצבו נפשנו. It's come to tell us about the last exile that we are now in, says the Olah Chaim, to comfort us from all our afflictions and tribulations. כי כל איש ישראל מענה ינחם נפשו בראותו אורך הגלות. Because everyone has enough. 2,000 years of exile, we want to be redeemed. נראה למי דומה? למצרים, tough. We were in Egypt for 400 years. לבבל, to Babylon, 70 years. לשניהם יחד, תע"ע. So together it's 470 years. ואין היום, and today, says the Olah Chaim, when he lived, which was the late 19th century, beginning of 20th, 1000 ותרע"ב. So today we already 1,672 years since we were exiled. מה יחל עוד? I want to be redeemed, says the Olah Chaim. ולא גלות לבד. It's not only being exiled from the land of Israel. אלא עינוי מהאומות, but also going through afflictions and tribulations with the other nations, כי כל גוי וממלכה בבני ישראל יעבודו. ואשר זה יסובב חשוב לא טוב, כי שפת אמת לא הוכרה בקוננת, והעריכה לשון שקר. And everywhere we go, we can't feel at home. We cannot be ourselves, and obviously the other nations are not treating us nicely. ובא הצופה ומביט עד סוף כל הדורות, קורא הדורות מראש. But Hashem, who knows everything, calls Moshe up, הודיע למשה, לזרז לישראל ובראשם בני תורה, שפתי כהן, אשר תורה יבקשו מפיהו אהרון ובניו, להודיע עד לדורות את הדבר הזה. So the Olah Chaim is reading this narrative, obviously in a very mystical way, with tremendous desire for Mashiach to come. And he says that really when you look at this parsha from that angle, you need to read that Hashem called Moshe to tell him to call Aaron and his children and the tribe of Kohanim, the people who learn Torah and try to teach Torah, and to tell them about Mashiach, which is Zot Torat HaOlah. This is the laws of the Olah, of the elevation offering. אמר זאת, למעט כל העליות שאין כמוה עולה. Meaning when the Olah Chaim read Zot Torat HaOlah, the elevation offering, as we know the elevation offering goes straight to God, there are no pieces that belongs to the owners that brought that korban, or to the Kohanim. So he looks at the word Olah not only as an elevation offering, but something that basically ascends, and ascends to the ultimate level. וחזר ופרש מיהו זאת, and what does it mean, that sacrifice of עולה? אמר הוא העולה כבר דכתיב מזאת עולה מן המדבר, which is עם ישראל. So now, let's digress for a second. When we read the sacrifices, we obviously think you bring an animal, you bring it to the Kohen, you designate it based on the reason that you bring it, and you move on. Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch that we read before obviously looked at that as just the different order between Vayikra and Tzav, and therefore he says, you know what, This parsha focuses on the Kohanim. The Olah Chaim takes this parsha to a totally different realm, a very spiritual, very mystical realm. And he says the korbanot, the sacrifices that are mentioned in our parsha, reflect and shows the end of Galut, the end of exile. And it starts first with Olah. The best sacrifice, the most unique and precious sacrifice is Olah, because it basically reflects Am Yisrael. Because there is a verse in Shir HaShirim, in the Song of Songs, Mi zot Olah min hamidbar. Who is that ascends from the desert? And that's obviously Am Yisrael. Al Mokda al HaMizbeach, that Olah is on the altar, on the fire, and Bet Pratim she'anachnu bahem. That talks about us. One, she'anu bnei Torah ma she'en bechol ha'umot. That we received the Torah, that no other nation received the Torah. וב' שאנו מיוסרים בגלות וייסורים ודלות. כנגד התורה אמר על מוקדה שנמשלה התורה לאש, וכנגד הגלות וענפיו אמר על המזבח, כי האיסורים מתייחס להם שם מזבח להיותם כפרה. So it says the Torah is being signified by the ash, by the fire, and the tribulations, the afflictions that we went through in Galut is the mizbeach, because it gives us kapara, atonement. והודיע הכתוב, כי באמצעות שני דברים תהיה עלייתנו מיועדת בהפלגות המעולות משונות לשבח, שבחים אשר לא היה ולא יהיה. And he says, when we have the Torah, and we have what we went through, history, we are Olah. We are almost like an elevation offering. וביאר עד מתי יהיו ישראל בגדר שני דברים אלו? And until when we will go through afflictions? כל הלילה, שהוא זמן הגלות, the entire night that symbolizes exile, until הבוקר, until the morning, שהוא זמן שיריק עלינו כבודו ועת הבוקר, והזמן הוא אחר ת"ק לאלף השישי. I'm not going to go into calculations here. I'm not a prophet, but the Olah Chaim, who was also a mysticist, he looks at the narrative of Olah, of the sacrifice, of the elevation offering, and he says the solution or the hint for when the galut is over is the 6,000 from creation, after 500 years into the 6,000th year from creation, which, by the way, we are already towards the end of it. Now, this is what the Olah Chaim says. Now, we can accept it if you are more of a mysticist. If you are not a mysticist, that looks a little bit far-fetched. But I think that the Olah Chaim's commentary reveals a tremendous desire to be redeemed, a tremendous desire to have Mashiach, and to read it into the narrative. Now, don't forget, we are reading Parashat Sav. This is Shabbat HaGadol, the Shabbat before Pesach. Benisan nigalu, benisan atidim liyigael, according to one opinion in Gemara in Rosh Hashanah. Rabbi Eliezer says, we were redeemed in Nisan, in the month of Nisan, and we're going to be redeemed in the month of Nisan, especially before Pesach. Maybe that night of Galut will come to an end, and we will see the morning, we will see the hope, we will see the redemption. This is the idea of the Olah Chaim looking at the sacrifice, elevation offering, which according to Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch belongs to the Kohanim, and Olah Chaim takes it and makes it so relevant to him, to the people he led, and to our generation as well. Based on the war that we went through, when you look at the Olah Chaim and you see what keeps us moving, what keeps us moving is obviously our commitment and faith, Torah, but at the same time, our brave soldiers who go through so much in order to bring this night to an end and to see the morning. So I think what the Olah Chaim does, and again, we can agree or disagree in terms of an analysis of a pasuk and to really think what a pasuk, what a verse can tell us. But the Olah Chaim definitely sends us a tremendous message to what we need to hope for. Rashi also has, in a way, in his commentary, something that belongs to us as well, which he says, Tzav et Aaron, command Aaron. Why it says Tzav? Ain't Tzav ela leshon zeruz. It's something that comes to create some kind of a haste, like quickly, do it. Miyad veledorot. It's now and it's for generations to come. Meaning, when we look at the sacrifices, it's not something that just belongs something in the past. The sacrifices for themselves, it's meaningless. The sacrifices, it comes to basically help us to relate, to come closer to Hashem. And that's the point of the korbanot. So when it comes to get close to Hashem, getting closer to Hashem, you need to have that commandment that basically tells you now, which means back then, but also ledorot, for generations to come. Not to allow lack of hope or pessimism to stop us from our ascent, to elevate ourselves, but rather, tzav, miyad veledorot, to feel the commandment, to feel our ability to ascend to higher levels. Rav Soloveitchik on Chumash says the following: the Torah often uses variant of the word tzav in discussing service in the Mishkan. For example, ve'ata tetzaveh. We will see it later on. But here it says tzav. Rashi on this verse provides the following background. The word tzav is meant to express urgency, zeruz, for both the immediate moment and for the future generations. The Torah must especially express urgency in a situation where there is a loss of money. That's what Rashi says. Many mitzvot can involve monetary loss. Why is the word tzav used specifically in the context of the sacrifice? So that's what Rav Soloveitchik says. He says, I understand the Torah sometimes says tzav, sometimes tetzaveh, but here it seems to be that bimyuchad, as we say in Hebrew, which means specifically here, the Torah says tzav, and because there is some kind of a monetary loss, because you bring korbanot, and korbanot are expensive, but why here? What is the meaning of it? Why is the word tzav used specifically in the context of the sacrifices? The loss of money is intrinsic to certain mitzvot, such as the mitzvah of giving charity. Thus the verse states, command the children of Israel that they shall give to the Levites from their hereditary possession, cities in which to dwell, meaning to give them cities in the provinces of their cities. That's called Arei HaLevihim, the cities of the Levites, that many of them also were used to what? To be Arei Miklat, refuge cities. The word tzav is used when a loss of assets is intrinsic to the mitzvah. Offering a sacrifice similarly involves such a loss of assets. Rashi uses the term ziruz, which is basically urgency, in describing how this mitzvah is to be fulfilled. There is an urgency associated with mitzvot that involve monetary loss. What is the meaning of the word ledorot for the future generations in this context? The mitzvot of mezuzah, tefillin, Shabbat are clearly ledorot, which means for generations to come. Thousands of years have gone by, and these mitzvot are observed as they had been when they were originally given. Shabbat, tefillin, as we said before. But in what way are the mitzvot of the Mishkan practiced today? And this is a really important question, because I think this question, in a way, escorts us in this entire book. Like, I read about the sacrifices. I read about where to sprinkle the blood, on the top, on the bottom, in the middle. What does that have anything to do with me? I'm not a Kohen. I don't have a Mishkan. Even for the Kohanim among us, even for the priests among us, I'm sure that you ask yourself, okay, I wish that I will be able to do it, but I can't do it right now. So what is the relevancy How is that relevant to me? Says Rav Soloveitchik, there has been no korban tamid for almost 2,000 years. In what stance does the mitzvah of offering korbanot continue? So then he brings the Gemara in Megillah. The Talmud in Megillah, the Babylonian Talmud in Tractate Megillah 31b, recounts a conversation between God and Avraham in the context of the Brit Ben HaBetarim, the covenant between the pieces. Avraham asked how he was to know that God would not forsake Israel if they sinned. So God answered Avraham in the merit of the temple sacrifices. Okay. Avraham insisted that this merit is fine when these sacrifices are really in existence. But what was to happen after the destruction of the temple? How can you guarantee to me, says Avraham to Hashem, that you will not abandon the Jewish people? God replied that if the children of Israel learned the laws surrounding the sacrifices, he would consider their study as a virtual sacrificial offering. When we cannot offer sacrifices, we recite the halachot pertaining to them as a substitute. There is a mikdash in our days as well, not physically, but through halachic study. This is the Mesorah, the tradition of Torah shebe'al peh, the oral Torah. Today we read Parashat Shkalim. At that time, Parashat Sav was with Parashat Shkalim, as if the Beit HaMikdash was still standing. We read Parashat Shkalim at the beginning of Chodesh Adar, talking about collecting Shkalim, collecting money for the Beit HaMikdash, and we don't have it. We read Parashat Para, about the red cow. We don't have a Beit Mikdash. We read Parashat HaChodesh, that also lead us to what? To the Pesach and Korban Pesach, the Paschal Lamb. We don't have a Beit Mikdash, but we read it, we learn it, we study it. Parashat Para reminds us to be ritually pure so that we may bring the Korban Pesach. Although we no longer offer a Korban Pesach, we read Parashat Para as if the Beit HaMikdash still exists. Rav Soloveitchik, I think, creates for us something to really think about. We need to internalize what he says and to think about it and to try to see how we can implement it in our daily lives. We have so many mitzvot that in a way are not relevant. Everything that belongs to the Beit Mikdash is not relevant to us. So what do we do with it? We just put it aside and wait for Mashiach? Or we learn about it, we study, we show anticipation. We learn it so we are ready. And that's what Rav Soloveitchik says. You need to imagine like it's there. And how do you imagine it? By learning it, by immersing yourself in those laws. In a way you recreate something. This is the idea of zchira, of remembering. This is the same thing that we will do in just few days when we celebrate Pesach. We tell the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim, and we need to show ourselves and we need to see ourselves like we ourselves went out from Egypt. How do you do that? By learning it, by talking to your children about it, by studying it, by imagining it, by acting it. You basically recreate the Exodus, you recreate Yetziat Mitzrayim. And that's what Rashi says. Tzav, I would like even to suggest that perhaps I'll put Rav Soloveitchik with Rab Shimshon Raphael Hirsch. Even though this parsha is more focused on the Kohanim, it's not only for them. It's miyad veledorot. We all now become Kohanim. We all now become priests. We all become teachers. We all have the obligation to transmit and to transfer the tradition we received to our children, to our grandchildren, to generations to come. It's to recreate what we don't have. And that's the idea of tzav, of command. This is not just something that comes from the generosity of our hearts. We have a commandment, we have an obligation to tell the story, to continue the story, to create the other link in this chain of generations. The Rebbe Milubavitch has a different insight to it. And he says, just as there are active completing the process that began with its slaughtering and preventive not letting the deadline for its burning pass, aspect of burning up the fats on the altar, there are both active and preventive aspects in the process of refining our pursuit of pleasure. We have, I'll give a little bit of a background here, we have the idea of active and preventive, which means we need to be active in the process of the slaughtering, the sprinkling of the blood, putting the sacrifice on the altar and everything else. And then we also need to prevent the sacrifice from violating what we call notar, leftover. Nothing should be left over after a certain time. Some korbanot it's one night and morning, some korbanot it's 2 nights. Okay, different laws. But then he says, the active aspect is performed by day, and the preventive aspect by night. Metaphorically, day signifies those aspects of our lives that are open expressions of spiritual light, i.e. divine consciousness, studying Hashem's Torah and fulfilling His commandments. Night, in contrast, signifies all other mundane aspects of our lives, whose divine dimension is obscured by the darkness of materiality. Thus, the twofold obligation to place the fats on the altar of fire both during the day and night indicate that we must transmute our self-oriented pleasure into God's centered pleasure, both when involved in spiritual pursuits as well as when engaged in our own mundane affairs. This is obviously a very Hasidish aspect and midrash of the verse, which means the Rebbe Milubavitch looks at the elevation offering and says to himself, in this sacrifice we have active and preventive. And in a way there is a demand, there is a requirement that our entire being will be on the sacrifice and on the Mizbeach, on the altar. What does that mean? What do we need to do? So the Rebbe Milubavitch look at the terminology of the verse and says there is night and there is day. The day is when a person is active, when you try to accomplish spiritual accomplishments. The night, he called it the mundane day-to-day things that we do, which are in a way filled with darkness that hide the spirituality that is hidden in this material world, in this physical world. He says both of them need to be on the Mizbeach. There is no disconnect between them. They must come and being intertwined together on the Mizbeach all night, all day. There is no separation between your spiritual pursuits and your physical pursuits. They both must be centered on the Mizbeach, on the altar. So now, let's go back, really, to the first verse that we started with. וידבר השם אל משה לאמור. Hashem spoke to Moshe saying, צב את אהרון ואת בניו לאמור, command Aaron and his children. Stop here. What can we learn from it? That, according to some of the commentators that we saw, really the focus of this parsha is Aaron and his children. It's really about the Kohanim. That's what Rabbi Shimshon Raphael here suggested. And therefore, we are going to talk about Olah, which is the highest level of sanctity, unlike what we spoke in Parashat Vayikra. However, we can also see that despite the fact that it seems to be that we are minimizing, that we are focusing in only on the Kohanim, Rashi says what? It's for now and for generations to come. Even though there is no Beit Mikdash, even though we don't have a temple, even though we don't have a tabernacle, the sacrifices has something to say to us. Zot Torat HaOlah. This is the law, this is the laws of the Olah, of the elevation offering. Says the Or HaChaim, Olah, it's not only about the sacrifice. It's about Am Yisrael. It's about the nation of Israel that ascends from the desert. That we are always try to elevate ourselves. And we will get out of this galut, this night, Kol halayla, this entire night of exile, of suffering, of tribulations, will come to an end. And there is going to be a morning that signifies hope and redemption and salvation. And then, says the Rebbe Milubavitch, Kol halayla al boker, on those times when we will have revelation of salvation and redemption, you will be able to center your entire being on this Mizbeach and to come close to Hashem. So what we try to do is to really show that the main question that every commentator asks is, how can I make this parsha, those sacrifices, when I don't have a temple, when I don't have a Mishkan, relevant to me? How can I find lessons there? How can I basically tell that story to the generations to come, that it will make sense to them, that it will be something that they can connect to their lives and obviously to Hashem and to the Torah? So, we all hope that the night is over and the morning has come. Morning of hope, of optimism, a morning of salvation and redemption. A morning that we can be our true selves and to be able to really fulfill our elevation. Thank you.